All right, there's glass half full and glass half empty when it comes to the Indiana Fever. Let's start with the empty. The Fever come up empty again without Caitlin Clark. A loss to the Los Angeles Sparks, another bad loss against another bad team. The more those add up, the more the season flirts with disaster, which hinges on Caitlin Clark's health anyway. And you see the importance of having Clark on the floor, her gravity. She can miss 1,000 shots in a row. It doesn't matter. The defense still has to pick her up 35 feet away from the basket. They still have to bring extra attention her way. With her out, that attention can shift to Aaliyah Boston. The court shrinks for the defense. The Fever get much easier to defend. Then there is the blowing leads in the second half. That has become a habitual problem. A lot of finger pointing going to go Stephanie White's way here. Here's my issue with that. Bit of a catch 22, if you will, when you're talking about missing 22, because the Fever went small to close the game and got beat on the boards. No question. They're getting murdered in the paint. But I think Stephanie White also had her 5 best players on the floor. Ari McDonald, Lexi Hull, Sophie Cunningham, Kelsey Mitchell, and Aaliyah Boston. 5 best players. Now, you could argue she needed a big out there, but who is the big that can be out there? Because as much as I was positive on this signing in the offseason, I got to keep it real. I was wrong. Natasha Howard has not been good enough. She can't catch the ball, just not productive enough, doesn't space the floor next to Aaliyah Boston. So she's the logical player to be out there, but it wasn't working with her on the floor either. So you put Howard on the floor, who wasn't working, and it might not work. And then you put the small ball lineup on the floor and it doesn't work, and you get criticized for it. That's what comes along with being a head coach. And look, you blow enough double-digit leads in the second half, it begins to become a pattern, and you do have to look at the coach in some way, shape, or form. I'm just looking at this specific game and trying to figure out what it was, right? Because I did see some encouraging things from this game as well, namely, Ari McDonald, who I think is going to be a big value add for the Fever going forward. The energy she brings, the speed she brings out on the floor, the way she's going to be able to play next to Caitlin Clark, I think at times, and get Caitlin Clark off the ball, because I think they do need to get Caitlin Clark a rest. She needs to come off pin downs, come off curls, get the ball out of her hands so she's not being the focal point of the defense every time, not getting beat up every time, getting some easier shots that aren't self-created threes. And that's a positive possibly going forward. Then the other thing is they got to find somebody in that front court with the DeWanna Bonner money. I get it. That's an easy thing for me to just say. You got to say who it is, and I got to look into that more deeply, which I will. Emma Mieseman has been a name that's floated out there who's still available. Obviously, I would look at the players the Valkyries might cast off, doing as good a job as they've done with scouting. It's not as if Ari McDonald wasn't just sitting on her couch a few weeks ago. But a rough loss for the Fever. There's no way to spin that in a vacuum. And now that continues to happen. They've lost to the Sparks. They've lost to the Sun, so on and so forth. They're blowing double-digit leads consistently. The other side of that is that they're possessing double-digit leads consistently, that they still grade out well, and that Caitlin Clark was not available for this game. And that's the gift and the curse of being so reliant on one player. And look, if Caitlin Clark is not healthy, if these injuries continue to pile up, the season gets flushed down the toilet. There's just no other way to put it. It is still salvageable because we still view her in this kind of superhero status. And I like the way that what McDonald has brought to the team. And Kelsey Mitchell is cooking now. Aaliyah Boston's had a great season, a bad game in this game. And on top of that, Lexi Hull is a very valuable player. I like McDonald and Cunningham, so that gives you're starting to build it out there. The question is the depth that goes on the front office. That goes on the front office, who failed in a lot of ways this offseason, because Bonner didn't work out. Howard hasn't worked out. Bree Turner's a negative. Colson doesn't really do anything out there. Timpson is a work in progress, who they need to give more minutes, but is still a development project at this point. The saving grace, I think, is McDonald and how she might play with Caitlin Clark going forward. That is something Stephanie White talked about before the game as far as this goes. Stephanie White had this to say.
What are you excited about having Aerie back?
Yeah, really excited about having Aerie back. I mean, certainly, her pedigree, her ability to have the ball in her hands and make plays, not just for herself, but for her teammates, and this tone that she sets on the defensive end of the floor. Certainly when we get C back, it gives us the ability to play C off the ball a little bit, take some pressure off of her. I mean, she's getting hounded 94 feet, 40 minutes a game, every game. And so just to be able to relieve some of that pressure with different kinds of looks. Aerie gives us a different look than Sid. And I think that having both of them is a benefit to us.
Look, Sid is solid, but she doesn't put any pressure on the defense like McDonald does. She's not as fast. She's not as impactful out on the floor. McDonald also talked about coming back to the team. This also before the game. Here is what Aerie said.
Yeah, Amber and I had, multiple talks just possibly about me coming back. And I was interested, but I did want to go through the process. There were a couple other teams interested. And I was just upfront with Amber. I'm like, hey, of course, I would love to be here, but I'm going to explore just to see what the other teams are talking about. But, in the back of my mind, I just knew this is the place to be.
And it is the place to be for her. I'm excited to see what she and Cece can do on the floor together. In the meantime, the season has to be salvaged. And in order to do that, the front office must address the mistakes and find front court help. Got to happen. And then, of course, the rest of it is up to the fate and the health of Caitlin Clark. Because without Clark on the floor, you see where the Boston struggles come in. I mean, it's obvious. Basketball 101, right? Caitlin Clark is pick and roll, feeding Boston. She's eating off that. Without her there, they can't even throw a proper entry pass. And the defense is collapsed. There's nothing there. I like that Kelsey Mitchell has broke out of her funk, but this is still a small team across the board. Even when, Clark is a big guard. That's another thing you forget. She rebounds. She's a big guard. So that changes the dynamics of things as well. And this can be a frenetic fun. They're going to be the fastest team in the league. There's no question in my mind if Clark is healthy and McDonald is there. But they have to combat getting crushed in the paint. And that's where the absence of Bonner is felt, and it's where the lack of production from Howard is felt, and where the nothing from Bree Turner is felt, and the youth from Michaela Timpson is felt. So Kelly Krauskopf and Amber Cox, I think the onus is on them a little bit more than Stephanie White, to be honest, to find somebody to fill that hole and fill that void. It's a problem that goes back to last year, too. I thought it was addressed in the offseason, but I thought wrong. But I'm not paid to make those decisions either. So with that said, I think if Clark is healthy and they can find a 4, they're in business. If not, it's a disaster. I don't really believe it's all that more complicated than that. And, the season hinges on Cece, which should be obvious.